Well, welcome to the August meeting. We're going to start a new series talking about hollow forms and hollowing. And this first session, we're going to talk about how you can hollow without hollowing tools, because a lot of us don't have the money or the resources to buy expensive rigs, and yet we'd like to turn hollow forms just like other folks can. So my history with hollow forms started in about 2007 when I happened to take a class with woodcraft, and the gentleman who was teaching us decided that we ought to do a hollow form. Now the trick was, and we'll talk about it more as we go on, is that we didn't hollow through the top of the vessel. We actually hollowed the bottom and then hollowed the top and put the two pieces together. So that's how this is going to go tonight. I brought a little sample. This was my first try at a hollow form, and everything went really well until I was trying to shape the outside, and unfortunately I went right through the neck of the little vessel that was supposed to stand about this high. But the neat thing about it is that you can look inside now and see how the joint fit together and how it forms the hollow shape. So to carry that a little farther, then you can start to do things like this. And this is actually a hollow form that's turned in two pieces. It's hollow down here in the bottom. It's drilled up through the center, and then as it's glued together and mounted back on the lathe, then you can shape the top. And so it's hollow all the way through. So that's fundamentally what we're going to be doing. Now, a lot of people are confused as to what a hollow form is. So I happen to bring a copy of Wood Turning magazine. Some of you get it, and if you're interested, let me know. I'll tell you more about it. But anyway, they happen to show in an article some of the differences between the different shapes. And as you progress across the top, you see the top of the vessels start to enclose a hollow center, and thus they become a hollow form. Interestingly, one shape that they didn't put in here was the shape of a bottle, and it turns out that back a number of years ago, Steve Childers turned some bottles for our apothecary display that we took to the AAW symposium in Richmond. So in the case of his bottle, he went in from the bottom and hollowed all the way to the top, just like a box. All right, so a little bit about wood orientation and how you would set up to do a hollow form. If you're going to do it in two pieces, it's certainly easy to do cross grain. However, most hollowing is done with end grain, like this piece here. This was actually a long, slender piece of wood turned into a cylinder and then hollowed and shaped. So you can do it either way, but typically when you're doing it on a rig, more often than not, it's end grain that you're hollowing into. So that's kind of how the wood is oriented. Tonight, with my project, what I'm going to do is show you a two-piece project. We're going to make a hollow form, and I'm going to bring up a picture of it here. And we're going to make a little flat hollow form where the bottom is about 1.5 inches tall and the top is about 1.5 inches tall. And there's going to be essentially a 7/16 inch hole down through the top. The reason for the 7/16 inch hole is I don't want other wood turners to stick their fingers in there to see how smooth it is. they're notorious for that. So we're going to make it small enough that they can't get their finger inside. All right, so as I showed you, the project tonight is going to involve 2 pieces of wood. Now, you could use wood that you've cut from a tree and slice it into blanks and use them. Tonight, I'm going to use a board that I had that was 2 inches thick, and I have cut blanks from that board, and I'm going to show you how I've arranged the grain. So the board was aligned this way, and I marked out the blanks and cut them on the bandsaw. So the grain is progressing across from right to left. Now, particularly if you have figured wood, you want to make sure that you know which side goes where, so that grain aligns when you put the pieces of wood together in the hollow form. So now what you have to decide is what's the top of the hollow form and what's the bottom of the hollow form, and we are then going to mark them so that we know which is which. All right, so you have to make sure you align the grain and you understand which one is the right-hand side and which one is the left-hand side. And as you're doing this, you have to decide, what's going to be the outside of the hollow form and what's going to be the inside. So for best grain alignment, generally speaking, if this is the best side, then you put the best side together. Or you can swap them around so that you have the best sides on the outside. They become the inside of the bowl. You have to make your decisions before you start so that you know what orientation you're going to mount this blank on the lathe to start the turning. Okay, so we have identified the top right and the top left, and these are going to become the outside of the hollow form. So if you want to make sure that your grain aligns and that it looks proper when you put it together, you have to orient these blanks accordingly and mark them accordingly. Otherwise, you will get very confused as to which you're dealing with. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mounting between centers. We're going to put a tenon on one side and a recess on the other side, and then we're going to turn it around. That particularly for the bottom gives you the opportunity to hold it so that you can shape the bottom and then hollow the inside. So we're going to spend some time doing that. Then we're going to do basically the same thing with the top, so that we can hold the top until we get the inside hollowed and the hole drilled for the entrance, and then we're going to take it off. So that's the process we're going to use. Okay, so I've mounted the blank between centers. I have a step center holding it on one side, and I have a one-way live center on the other. And I want to make sure that it's good and tight and locked in, and everything is good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to round this off perfectly round. I'm going to create a tenon on this side to hold it when I turn it around. Okay, now what I'm going to do is measure the tenon with a divider so that we get it the right size to fit the chuck jaws. One thing you want to be sure of is that you try to get it at center line, and you don't ever want to touch the outside edge of the divider, otherwise it'll kick and you'll get a catch. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's round, and I'm going to round it off. We don't care if the bottom is a little bit smaller than the original 8-inch diameter, because that gives us a little extra to play with when we put the top of the hollow form on. We can blend it in. So what I'm going to do now is round it, and then I'm going to stop and face it off and form the tenon that I just marked. And we'll check it, see how we are. Looks good. Okay, so now we'll turn the tool rest. All right, to move the tool rest into position, I'm going to face it off and form the tenon. And I'm going to use a pull cut here. When you're doing this, be sure you don't get your hand up close to this point edge, because it's really sharp and it'll definitely cut you. And if you want, you can always just bevel it off a little bit. Okay, so I've faced it off. I've formed a tenon here of probably about 3/16 or so. What I need to do now is to put a dovetail on it, so I'm going to change over to a small skew and use that to shape the dovetail. Okay, so I'm going to angle in for the dovetail, and then I'm going to make sure that the top of this is flat, so that when the jaws grip, they're on a solid footing right here. Okay, we have a tenon. Now we're ready to turn it around and start working on the other side. Okay, now that I've created a tenon and a flat surface, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my jaws, and I'm going to hold it here until they slide in, and I'm going to make sure that it's seated right up against that flat surface, and tighten the jaws in on that dovetail so that it's tight and secure. Okay, now I usually take two hands and get a good grip on it. I'd swivel it once, do it again, swivel it again, do it one more time, and that way I'm sure that it's held in there firmly. Now that we have it reversed, I'm going to position the tool rest so that it's just about center height. And I'm going to take and mark the outside of the recess that I'm going to make to form the foot of the hollow form and to hold it when we hollow it. So that's the first step, and I will get into that right now. That's close enough. Alright, so now we're ready to face this off. Our next concern is going to be shaping the outside of this. Now, we have to go in roughly 1/4 of an inch, a little over 3/16 to face this off and form the foot. What we want to do then is eventually make a gradual curve that comes up to meet the top of the hollow form. So we want to identify how far up we want to go. So the curve will come up from here and end up approximately in this neighborhood, about 1/4 of an inch below the back of the blank here. So that's going to be the target we're shooting for. This curve is going to be very gentle and very delicate, so when we get to that, we're going to work on it very slowly, because we don't want to take too much wood off, but we want to get the shape. So I've adjusted the tool rest so that the tool's at center. Okay. Now at this point it's pretty rough, and if I were doing this at home I would go ahead and refine this and sand it and all perfectly smooth and make sure that everything was ready to go. But essentially I have about a 3/16 inch recess right here with a dovetail on it, and to hollow it we're going to turn it around and mount it on the recess. Okay, so now what we're ready to do is we're ready to put our little notch in about 1/4 of an inch or so, and that's going to go all the way around the rim. That's what we're going to have to match up against. The other thing is that some people will glue these things together, end grain to end grain or side grain to side grain. Really don't trust that. So what I do is I come in about 1/4 inch down and 1/4 inch in, and I leave a little face grain lip there for the glue to adhere to. It's just a way of making sure that it doesn't come apart in the future. And since this is face grain, you know, wood moves when it has moisture, and if it moves too much and you haven't formed a solid bond, it'll crack apart. So what we want to do is make sure we got a good bond here. Alright, so I'm going to come in just a little bit. Yeah. Okay, now we've got our little ledge on there, and the next step is to start hollowing, and hollow down just like you were doing a bowl, except I'm going to start in the center and work to the side in steps, because I don't want to put too much pressure on this mounted recess. So we'll start in the center, we'll work our way to the edge. Before I do hollow, I'm going to stop and drill a little hole in there to make sure I don't go through the bottom of my recess. I've done that before, and so I think we'll take a minute here to get a depth gauge out. Alright, it's just about where I want it to be, roughly 1/4 inch, so that we take the weight out and make it feel like it's hollow. I'm going to turn just a bit more off. Okay, now if you wanted, just because there's a hole in it and somebody could shine light in there, you could sand this down and make it look nice, but remember, it's only a little tiny hole, so nobody's going to get their finger in there to feel it. So at this point, this is the bottom, and we're finished with the bottom. Alright, so now what we've done is we've taken the top, and as you recall, I marked it so I knew what would be the outside. I've put a tenon on it. I've rounded it a little bit to shape it, but I haven't made it the final shape. And now I've rechucked it and faced off essentially the inside of our hollow form. I've drawn a little arc here, or a line, so that I can start the process of fitting the bottom. Now, if you recall, when we made the bottom, we put a lip on it, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a recess into the top to match that lip, and I'm just going to work up to it till it fits, just like fitting the top on a box. Okay, so now I have a first try at it, and we'll take a look here and see what it looks like. And as you can tell, we've got quite a ways to go, so we'll work on it some more. We're getting close. Oh, micro. We're so close. This is the time. I think we're there. Matter of fact, I think we're a little bit too wide. So we know we can go in just a bit. Looking close, looking close. Or sometimes I feel like this is trying to win the lotto. You have to keep trying. Oh, just a hair. It's so close. It is so close. Okay. I think we're almost there. Almost there. Just a little bit more. Voila! Got just a little crack to take care of and we are good. I say that, now I got to get it off. Alright. That's what we want. Okay. I'm trying to match up the grain so that we orient it the same each time. And I think we're there. I really think we are there. I think the main problem is that the wood's moved a little bit. Not quite as flat as it was, but it's pretty good. So at this point, we'll hollow out the top and put the hole in it. And that should get us ready to glue the parts together. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a little hollow or dimple in the center, and then I'm going to run my drill all the way through. Okay, and we'll get my drill. I'll take the tape off. Okay. Okay, it's all the way through. And now the next job is just to rough hollow the inside. Alright, so now I have the bottom, I have the top, I have a hole drilled, and again, you can sand it if you feel like you want to sand the inside and finish it, but it's not likely that anybody is going to touch it. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to recommend that you use Titebond when you're doing yours to make you a solid bond. But I'm going to use a combination of CA and Titebond just for this demonstration, so I can get it tight enough to finish it out. So I'm going to put on a little bit of Titebond. And by the way, I'm using thick as opposed to a thin CA, because I want a little bit of working time. I'm trying to put on a little stretch here about every 45, 90 degrees. And get it up on the rim and on the edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some Titebond in the spots where I didn't put CA. That is, provided my Titebond is flowing.
Don't do that. Well, I mean, you can, but I'm just going to unclog this whole thing for you.
It's good enough for what we're doing. It's messy, but we'll get her done. Okay. So now I got to line up my grain again. And okay, now bring them. All right, now we'll put some pressure on here. Okay. Okay, so now we've got it glued up. We'll give it a second here for the CA to set. Okay, that should do it. I took it off. Now I'm going to turn it around and remount it in the recess that we put in the bottom. And where's that towel? Okay, now we put the one way with the cone on it. Bring it up. Lock it in. Make sure that it's securely seated. Tighten it up. Alright, make sure you tighten it several times. Okay, so now we're in a position to shape up the top and to match the bottom. Now, if I were doing this at home, I would spend a whole lot more time aligning the grain and doing a lot of sanding and so forth, but because we're just demonstrating here, I'm just going to do a rough round over on this and finish up the top. First thing I'm doing is blending the sides together, so we'll get that done first. Okay, so I've blended the sides. I've given a little bit more shape to the top. In a perfect situation, I would have the shapes pretty much even so that it looks geometric. Now what I'm going to do is work on the tenon and shape it into a little ring or something around the entrance. So. Okay. And we'll finish it off. And again, if you would, you can sand that up and make it look like a hollow form. And so we now have a hollow form without hollowing tools. Okay, so that's a hollowing form without hollowing tools. I hope that all of you will give it a try. You certainly don't have to do anything as big as this. As I showed you, you can make a small vase. You can make it as small as a box. The idea is just to have an opening in the top and certainly be hollow on the inside. If you have any questions, please let me know.